Alright guys, tonight's gonna be a weird one. Welcome back to the channel, and seriously, thanks for hanging out here again. So, I was digging through Reddit, and ended up finding a bunch of stories from people who spent time out in the wild and swear they encountered something not exactly human. Some described creatures watching them from the trees, others heard things that shouldn't even exist out there. Could be cryptids, could be people imagining things after being alone too long in the woods, who knows? But either way, some of these stories are genuinely unsettling. So yeah, if you're into creepy wilderness stories like this, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Alright, turn the lights down a little, and let's get into it. This happened about 1 year ago during the summer. Something you should keep in mind is that the house I had lived in had 1 acre of land surrounding the house. Where I had lived was near farmland. I had woken up around 8 in the morning on my living room couch, having fallen asleep the previous night, as well as my mother and sister, who were sleeping beside me. I had planned to watch this movie I hadn't finished the previous night on my laptop, as well as eat breakfast in the dining room of my house. I had sat down at the end of the dining table, which was the closest chair to the kitchen. Keep in mind, if I leaned back in my chair, I could see onto the farther side of the kitchen, where the door that led to the deck was, which had this huge window right next to the door. So, I turn on my movie and start to eat my breakfast as my dog trots over to me and sits next to me. I believe I was about 45 minutes into the movie when my dog had switched her spot, now sitting right under the archway that led to the kitchen, staring at God knows what. I felt her move, but I didn't really think anything of it. If it was serious, she would have been barking like hell. About 10 to 20 minutes go by, and I glance over at my dog, noticing she's still staring at something. This time, I heard shuffling or scratching over in the kitchen. I called out her name, but she just wouldn't move, so when I had walked over, I followed her trail of vision and noticed that she was staring at the window in the kitchen that leads to the deck of the house. I nearly peed myself when I saw something, or somebody, behind the window outside, peeping through the blinds. I forgot to mention there was a chair on the deck, right under that specific window. So whatever the hell that was had to have been balancing on the chair to look inside. It looked bald almost? And white with a pinkish tone. It had been holding onto the window frame, peering at my dog and me, while scratching the screen on the window with this horrible heavy breathing. I remember thinking in the moment it was a person trying to break in, because whatever it was wanted to get in so desperately. The thing was sort of small? And it seemed as if it didn't want me to see the rest of its face, only its eyes. This whole time my dog had been watching whatever that thing was and not barking. I'm saying this because something as simple as dropping a cup will send my dog into a fit, barking like crazy. Even a voice coming from the TV would cause a great couple of minutes of barking from her. Now, as I said, I believe someone was trying to get in. So I ran over to the couch in the living room, shaking my mother awake, and bringing her to the kitchen. And of course, whatever the hell it was had simply disappeared. I would have thought I was losing my mind if my dog hadn't been seeing the same thing as me. I peered out another window, checking the driveway in case it was a person and they had driven a car here, but there was nothing of the sort. My mother went out onto the deck and looked around, but there was nothing there, except fingerprints on the window frame. We checked around the whole yard, and nothing was found except for the prints. I'm quite traumatized to this day, knowing that whatever that had been was watching me for quite a while and I didn't know. And also the fact that, if it was a person, it would take a while to get off of the land. Even if they tried running away, we would have caught them because of the huge yard. I'm not living in the house where this had happened anymore, thankfully. I've had other scary experiences in the house, but those are stories for another day. My grandma lived to be 99 years old and passed about 8 years ago. I'm now in my 40s, and to this day I've never quite felt a connection to another human being as I shared with her. My wife was around 2 months pregnant with our first child when I got word that my grandma wasn't doing so well. I was crushed that she likely wouldn't be able to meet my firstborn child. At this point I lived across the country from where my grandma was and had just started a new career. And my mom told me my grandma had developed bad dementia and suggested it was okay to stay home and handle my priorities versus seeing her in this state. I ultimately decided to stay home to help my pregnant wife. My grandma hung on for a couple months, then passed, and a few months later our son was born. Now this is an important detail for later. My son has these insanely piercing bright blue eyes and platinum blonde hair. Fast forward 6 months or so, and I'm in my son's room one night, trying to get him to sleep. He was in his crib and suddenly turned his head a bit to look up towards the corner of the ceiling, almost as if startled. Then he started laughing hysterically, like so hard he could barely catch his breath. I'm following his line of sight and looking up there. There are no nearby pictures or decorations up there, just a blank wall in that corner of the room. The next day it happened again, so I went to get my wife from the other room so she could see how hard he was laughing. She told me that he was doing the same thing during the day the whole week while I was at work. It became a regular occurrence multiple times a day and borderline creepy because he was clearly seeing something up there. A couple months later my mom came to visit. One night she's helping me get my son ready for bed. And we get into a conversation about my grandma's last days, particularly how her dementia was getting worse and worse as it went on until this one specific day. Here's the first kicker. She tells me this one day she goes to visit my grandma, and she's in bed, her feet dancing back and forth with a huge smile on her face. And it's the first somewhat normal conversation they have in about a month. Mom, wow, you're so happy today. Grandma, yeah, my friend came to visit me again. Mom, who's that? Grandma, the boy with the penguins. Mom, oh, is he a boy visiting someone in the nursing home? Grandma, no, he lives in there. Then she points to the corner of the room near the ceiling. To humor her, my mom asks what he looks like. Grandma, the boy with the blue eyes and white blonde hair, he's going to visit me every day now. At this point my jaw is practically on the floor. She proceeds to tell me how from that day forward it's all my grandma will talk about. Every single day until the day she dies, a blue-eyed blonde boy with penguin friends who lives on a tropical island inside the wall pops in to visit her. I then tell my mom about my son and the giggling and the ceiling. We're both shocked at the coincidence, and I ask what's with the penguins. My mom has no clue, neither do I. I want to believe at this point my grandma and son had some sort of otherworldly connection, but the rational side of me is like, she had dementia, babies do weird stuff sometimes, and penguins and tropical islands make no sense. But here's the second kicker, and I can't deny it after this. Fast forward, my son is roughly 4.5. Out of the blue he starts talking about this place where he used to live before he was born called Krypton every single day. This is my best interpretation of spelling it. He says Krypton is like a planet. But not near Earth, and where people can fly and animals talk, among many other details. I listen to his stories about it and I'm happy he has a big imagination. At this point I had forgotten about the penguins. One day I'm going through an old photo album and see a pic of my grandma. I call my son over to come see the picture, and this is the first time I'm ever showing him a picture of my grandma. He says, I know her, she's my friend from Krypton. My hair stands up, and I ask him to tell me more about her, and he says, she came over and ate pineapples with me and my penguins on my island when I lived there. I then burst into tears as the details of my mom's story came rushing back to me. I feel like the probability of all this being only coincidence is nearly impossible. I don't know what it all means, but I'm grateful to be able to finally share this. Thanks for listening. I've always been hesitant to put this out there because it is very personal to me. My son is now 7 years old and rarely talks about Krypton, and if I ask, he says he remembers and will acknowledge it, just with nowhere near the level of detail he once did. I left out so many details to try and keep the story short. He drew literally hundreds of pictures of it, and I've saved most in a binder. He talked about it for hours at a time on a daily basis until he was around 6. He asked me once if I remember being there. I said no, and he said, we've traveled together for a long time. I asked how long, and he said, higher than people can count. He also claimed he was once my dad a long time ago. My wife bought him a stuffed animal when he was a newborn, a gray elephant. He named it Ellie when he was older and told us that there was an elephant on his island that taught people to travel to other places. And that since his mom gave him the stuffed elephant, that's how he knew he was in the right place. I know this ultimately proves nothing, but I will say when you're a parent, you know the difference when you see your child speak with true conviction. It's 2004, at 3-something in the morning. My family and I are preparing for a road trip to the Grand Canyon. We live in SoCal. Everything is getting packed away in the kitchen, and I'm asked to take out the garbage. I walk outside. It's the kind of dark when it's too early for morning still but too late for night, and it's freakishly quiet outside. I thought nothing of it at the time. Our trash cans were located on the side of the house in the backyard, halfway to the gate. If you stood at the side of my house looking towards the gate, you would see a hedge to the left of the gate that goes up to your waist. Across the street is another house with a driveway light installed. The light gives off that blaring white security light. Anyway, I get to the trash can to throw away the junk, and when I look over towards the gate, that's when I saw it, whatever it was. I could only see the outline of it because the blaring white security light was in my eyes. But it was the smoothest and roundest head I've seen, which connected to very slouched shoulders. At first I didn't know what I was looking at, just an odd shape the same height as the hedges. It wasn't until it moved silently and slowly towards the bottom of the hedge and to the neighbor's yard that I saw it looked headish. I was 14 at the time and just stood there, waiting for more movement or sound. After about 1 minute. Yes, I waited. On not hearing anything, I stepped backwards until I was able to sprint back towards the kitchen door. I don't know what it was, or why it moved so silently, but it wasn't much longer before we moved out of that house due to strange things. Thinking back, I don't remember a lot of strange things happening before things started going kind of sour at home. Without dragging out all my dirty family laundry, a fair business that I'd really rather not blab on about, I can say that things were usually fine at my house. But towards the end of our residency there, the house itself was completely different in feel and comfort. About 4 months had passed, and my parents were really trying to make things work out for my brothers and my sake. Things were still tense, like you would expect them to be, but everything mostly functioned as normal. If I could pinpoint the start of weird things happening, I would say it here, on a summer night when my grandma and aunt visited us randomly. I opened the front door for them and let them enter. Before I closed the door, I noticed something attached to the front doorknob with rubber bands. I pulled it off and took it inside. When I examined it, I found it was this scentless, light green, putty-like substance with what appeared to be little yellow, red, and black seeds or balls. At first I thought it was crap, but it didn't smell. Hell, it might have been. I don't know. Anyway, it was wrapped in several leaves and bound with twine, which was then secured to our front door with a rubber band. No note or anything, just that. I brought it to the kitchen where my family was seated and asked them what they thought it was. When I told them where I found it, my aunt started acting really paranoid, and my grandma looked really upset. My aunt said something about this being bad, and she told me to take it outside and pee on it. Yeah, pee on it. I shook my head and laughed. Why would I do something like that? Not allowing this thing to not get pissed on, she took it from me and went outside. My grandma said something in Spanish to my mom, and she rolled her eyes. When my aunt returned, my mom was thoroughly disgusted with my aunt and told her to knock it off with that crap, that our house is protected by God. And that superstitious crap like that won't be allowed. My mother's side of the family has had a history of doing all kinds of superstitious ideologies. Apparently, according to my grandma, several of my great aunts and uncles are practicing healers in Cuba. Both spiritual and physical. I have reason to authenticate the validity of her statements too. That's another story too. Anyway, since then, my brother and I have seen our fair share of figures in the hallways, doorways, and outside. Our parents' fighting would get more and more violent. Things wouldn't feel good in the house like they used to. With my cousin living in that house now, I can tell you they still don't. The icing on the cake for my devout Christian mother was the reoccurring nightmares my brother and I shared of someone telling us we are unloved and unwanted. Yeah. It got pretty dark before we left the house, but the strangest part was the feeling of sadness and regret on our last day. I thought I would be happy, but I wasn't. I feel like this was the start of it all, if I had to choose. I don't live there anymore. I've since moved into my own house with my wife. But that house is in the middle of suburbia, Pomona. We moved from that house in 2008, and my parents, for better or worse, are still together to this day. I haven't had any strange occurrences happen in the house we moved to in 2008, nor in the house I am in now. The house in Pomona still gives me horrible vibes though, so I firmly believe whatever it is about that place that made it so bad is still there. My cousin even has her fair share of bad things going on there too. They're kind of personal though. She's looking to move soon. I'm sure whatever shadow figure I saw outside is linked to that thing on the doorknob. It was placed there when my parents were fighting. By whom? No idea, and things only got worse until we left. Why my family was freaked out by it still eludes me. My grandma says she doesn't remember this, poor old grandma, and I still haven't asked my aunt about it. Back in 2017, I lived with my aunt for several reasons, and while living with her, I got a job at Walgreens, which was roughly a 20 to 30 minute bike ride away, and the route took you through a very forested or woodsy area that also had a huge park in it as well as some hiking or walking trails that would occasionally go underground for a bit. One night after working a closing shift, I was on my way home and got towards the area where the foresty or woodsy trail began or started. And I stopped a little ways into it and took my phone out to pop on some music as well as to text my aunt that I was on the way home and to leave the door unlocked if she goes to bed. Shortly after sending the text and putting my phone back into my pocket, I heard the sound of a branch a short distance in front of me snap, which caused me to sharply look up, and that's when I saw it. A tall, bone-thin thing just standing in the middle of the trail a short distance in front of me. Large black eyes, no nose, and a small slit for a mouth. Its hands were slightly in front of it as if it was in a semi-crouched or standing position, and I could see that its fingers were long and razor-sharp and bony-like. Its skin, or maybe lack of skin, was a very palish yellow, almost like what an aged and dirty bone would look like. Before I could really, fully process this thing, it let out a screech, like, it's hard to describe but certainly wasn't, but it a sound that humans or anything normal could produce. And within a second, it had leapt from the trail into the bushes or woods, and almost as if a trance had been removed from me, I kicked off my bike and began to pedal as fast as I could so I could get away from the area and back home. The whole time, I could hear twigs and heavy branches breaking in the distance, close enough to hear but far enough that the darkness and trees or shrubs or bushes blocked my view of it. This thing was chasing me, or rather hunting me, and it terrified me. Ever since that encounter I've been extremely wary and cautious of entering woods or heavily forested areas, especially at night, as I truly am deathly afraid of encountering a creature like that again. It was traumatizing to encounter something like that, but to also realize and feel that you are the subject of the hunt. Like a few months after this, I wound up moving out of state, and one of the main reasons was this event and creature. And last year when I did finally move back to my home state with my fiancée, she had to keep calming me down because she knew I was home state anxious about coming home and possibly seeing that thing again. That event was also what made me truly a believer in the paranormal and cryptids. I was a believer but highly skeptical before this event, but experiencing it and seeing it with my own eyes made me lose all skepticism of these things and more. The only thing I'm terrified of is this black shadow figure that came out of nowhere like John Cena when I was 17. Okay, so before I say this, I want to preface it with I'm an extreme skeptic. I don't generally believe in ghosties and ghouls, so I'm open to any explanation about what this was. It starts with me and my mom sitting in our living room at around 11:30 at night. We were just talking and having a good time, everyone else in the house was asleep. There's a hallway leading out of the living room, and the only light we had was from another room adjacent to the living room, so that specific hallway was completely black as the light wasn't reaching into it. So as we were talking, I just scanned my eyes around the room. Neither of us felt creeped out or anything, it was a completely cozy vibe. When my eyes passed over the entrance to the hallway though, I was stunned. Like, literally, I couldn't move, just as I was wondering, why can't I move? I realized that tears were streaming from my face. Not individual tears, I was crying actual streams. As I realized that suddenly, I got hit with the worst depression or dread that I've ever felt in my life. It felt like a lead ball of grief was in my stomach. I remember saying to my friend the day after, I could kill everyone I love with my bare hands, and I still don't think my grief would exceed what I felt. Not that I'm a psychopath, I really love my family. It's just showing how absolutely dreadful I felt. Anyways, as all this is going on, I'm still trying to figure out what the hell is happening. That's when I make it out in the darkness. The only way I can describe how I saw it is that the thing was darker than black. It was a void within the darkness in the shape of a man. It was very tall, I'm talking like around 7.5 feet. Kind of small head, very broad shoulders that tapered down into a slim waist and legs. As I'm stuck staring at it for what was probably 20 to 30 seconds, I see it turn its body in this weird 90-degree heel turn, almost robotic, and walk down the hallway and out of my line of sight. Once it left my view, I could move again. I looked at my mom, she was looking at me, and we ran the hell out of the house. Apparently she was paralyzed as well, only she experienced this sensation like her entire back was on fire. She was stuck staring at me, as I was stuck staring at it. She said I had this look of pure terror on my face as I cried buckets. I went and stayed with my grandma. Wouldn't come back to the house for 3 weeks. So that's my story. What annoys me the most is how it felt completely fine right beforehand. The most terrifying experience of mine wasn't in some intense buildup of anxiety or anything. So now, even when everything is fine, and I'm cozy, I'll randomly get paranoid because that MF can come from anywhere. Funny thing is I used to be somewhat scared of ever seeing a ghost, until I finally saw one walk right up to me with my own eyes. I can describe it as a translucent woman with glasses, a purple shirt, and blue pants who walked from the dark hallway and into the light of the break room of my workplace, a healthcare facility, at the time before she would disappear in front of me. She was about 4 feet away from me when she vanished. Seemingly like she was more visible in the darkness, I could see outside of the break room doorway, but when entering the light, it made her fade away. After that encounter, strangely, I wasn't afraid of ghosts anymore. In fact, it somewhat encouraged me that some part of us might still linger after death. There is a different, potentially paranormal occurrence that troubles me now, so much so that I gave up doing something I used to do all the time when I was young. I used to love going out into the woods alone at night as a kid just to see the fireflies in our area at the time at their busiest, which was a trippy, trance-inducing sight to behold if you caught it at the right season. Fast forward to now, after learning about all of the missing 411 victims and other things people have been telling me from around these parts, Mark Twain Forest, I haven't been brave enough to go into the deeper parts of the woods alone anymore. I've never had any encounters with anything paranormal in any trek through a forest, but if anybody has walked into the deepest, remote parts of Mark Twain Forest at night for long periods, it tends to really mess with your head. It has a kind of Blair Witch feel to it, but all of us who live in this general area agree that if Sasquatch is real, this forest is the kind of place you'll be likely to see it, or if you're going to get abducted by a UFO, it'll likely happen here in the middle of absolute nowhere. I was recently in San Diego, staying in a little rental right on Mission Beach. It was one of those quiet evenings where the air felt heavy with salt and the sound of the waves just kind of blended into the background. It was around 8:30, already dark but not pitch black yet. There was still that faint bluish tint along the horizon. I decided to step outside for some air and walk along the water for a bit. As I got closer to where the waves were breaking, I noticed something moving right at that spot, where the foam meets the sand. At first, I thought it was just seaweed getting tossed around or maybe a bird hopping along. But then it started slithering in this way that immediately caught my eye. It wasn't moving like any fish I've seen, and it definitely wasn't a seal or anything like that. The shape was long and low, and what stood out to me the most was the color. It was orange, not bright neon orange, but a dull, natural-looking shade, almost like rust or the color of an autumn leaf when the light hits it. I froze for a second just watching it. It moved smoothly, kind of weaving back and forth like a snake, but its body seemed thicker, almost like it had a head or torso more like an alligator's. I could only see it clearly for a few seconds before it slipped under the water again. The way it moved didn't feel frantic, it was more like it knew exactly where it was going. I didn't have my phone on me because it was charging inside, which I regretted almost immediately. Not that I think a photo would have done much good, the light was too dim, and it was far enough away that it probably would have just looked like a blur anyway. Still, it would have been nice to have something to show. When I went back inside, I told a couple of people about it, and later that night I decided to post on Reddit to see if anyone local had ever seen something similar. I was just curious, not trying to make a big deal out of it. But the replies I got were brutal, people accusing me of trolling, making stuff up, or trying to get attention. I ended up deleting the post after a while because it wasn't worth arguing over. I'm from the Midwest, so just being near the ocean was amazing to me. I'm used to lakes and rivers, not waves and tides, so I spent a lot of time just standing there watching the water roll in. That's probably part of why this thing stuck with me, it was so different from anything I've ever seen before. I've tried Googling around, looking up sea creatures from the area, but nothing really matches what I saw. I keep thinking maybe it was some kind of eel or fish that got washed up weirdly by the current, but the color and the movement still don't make sense. Either way, it's been sitting in the back of my mind ever since. I didn't feel scared at the time, just weirded out. It was one of those things where you're not sure if your eyes are playing tricks on you, but you know you definitely saw something. I kind of wish I'd gone back down there the next night to see if it showed up again, but I didn't. I just keep wondering what the heck that orange, half alligator, half snake looking thing really was. When I was a kid, I used to camp out in the backyard sometimes. My friend and I thought it was the best thing ever, even though we were only a few hundred feet from the house. Our property ran down into a little valley, and at the bottom there was a wetland area with a narrow creek winding through it. In the summer, it would fill up with frogs and bugs, and the air would get heavy and kind of earthy smelling once the sun went down. That night, we set up the tent near the edge of the yard where the grass started getting tall. It was one of those small dome tents, probably meant for 2 kids and a pile of snacks more than actual camping. We brought flashlights, a deck of cards, a couple of sodas, and a half bag of chips. I remember the air being really still, no wind, just the hum of insects and the occasional croak from down near the creek. We were in the middle of playing cards when we heard it. It came from the direction of the wetland, somewhere deep enough that it echoed faintly up through the trees. The sound itself was awful, kind of wet and broken, like something between a goose being strangled and a scream. There was this gurgling to it too, like whatever was making the noise was half underwater. It went on for a few seconds, stopped, and then started again, louder. Neither of us said anything for a bit. We just froze, looking at each other. I think we were both waiting for the other one to say it was nothing, but neither of us did. After another minute or two, we both kind of agreed, without really saying it, that maybe we should go inside for the night. We unzipped the tent and made our way back to the house, trying not to look toward the woods. Inside, my parents were still up watching TV, and we told them about the noise. My dad just laughed, but my mom said it was probably porcupines mating. I'd never heard that sound before, so I figured maybe that was true. It made enough sense at the time, and it was easier to believe that than to think something else was out there. As I got older though, I started thinking they just said that to keep us from getting spooked. My mom later told me she'd actually seen cougars down near the wetland before, even though they're supposedly gone from Pennsylvania. She swore by it, said she saw one once near dusk, walking the edge of the creek, tail low and long. I've camped plenty since then, but that sound still sticks in my memory. It wasn't like any animal noise I've ever heard before or since. Every now and then, when I'm back visiting my parents and I walk down near that part of the property, I'll think about that night. The quiet tent, the wet smell of the valley, and that awful sound echoing up through the dark. I mistakenly chased what I thought was my dog through the house once. It happened in the middle of the day, with bright sunlight coming through the windows. There was nothing spooky about the atmosphere at all. I was sitting in my room doing something on my computer when I saw this quick movement in the hallway, a shape about the size of my dog, same color too. Without even thinking, I called out her name and told her to get out of my room, the way I usually did when she tried sneaking in to lie on the carpet. She darted past the doorway, and I got up and went after her. I saw her tail, or what I thought was her tail, disappear around the corner toward the master bedroom, so I followed. I kept calling out, getting a little more irritated because she knew she wasn't supposed to be in there. I rounded the corner, expecting to find her nosing around by the laundry basket or under the bed, but she wasn't there. I figured maybe she'd slipped into the master bathroom, so I walked in. That room only has one entrance, no other way out. I looked behind the shower curtain and even checked behind the door, but there was nothing. Just quiet, sunlight on the tiles, and no sign of her anywhere. That's when it hit me that my dog was actually locked in her kennel on the other side of the house. I went and checked to be sure, and there she was, still asleep. It was one of those moments that makes you stand there for a bit, trying to make sense of what just happened. I replayed it in my head, the movement, the sound of paws on the floor, the way it turned the corner, and it all felt completely real. That wasn't the only strange thing, either. Another time, I was walking down the hallway and suddenly ducked out of instinct because something black came flying straight toward me. It looked like a bird or maybe a bat, just a quick blur that zipped past my head and should have hit the wall behind me, but it didn't. It just vanished. There was no sound, no thud, no wings flapping. 1 second it was there, and the next, nothing. It's not like these things happen all the time, but it's happened enough that I remember each one clearly. I've gone through the logical explanations, shadows, reflections, tricks of light, and maybe that's all it is. But every time, it feels just as solid and real as anything else in the room. I've never been under the influence of anything, never tired enough to be half dreaming. It's always in the middle of an ordinary day, when everything seems normal. It's not terrifying, just unsettling, like catching a glimpse of something that shouldn't be there and then having no way to prove it ever was. About 10 years ago, back when I was living in Michigan, I was driving around with a friend one evening. We were cutting through a few side streets near our neighborhood, the kind of quiet suburban area where you mostly just see people walking dogs or kids on bikes. It was still light enough outside to see clearly, maybe around dusk. That's when we noticed this animal on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was just a stray dog, but as we got closer, it didn't look right. Its body shape was close to a dog's, but the way it moved was off somehow, lower to the ground, slower, like it was testing each step. Its fur was dark and slick looking, almost like it had just come out of the water. The first thing that popped into both our heads was that it looked like one of those infected dogs from the first Resident Evil movie. Not in a supernatural way, just that same wet, unhealthy, wrong kind of look. We both kind of went quiet as we passed it. I slowed down, but neither of us wanted to stop. It wasn't acting aggressive or anything, it just kept walking along the side of the street, head low, not paying attention to us. It stood out so much against the normal backdrop of houses and lawns that the image of it stuck with me for years. Fast forward maybe 4 or 5 years later, I was working late shifts at the time, and one night I was driving home around 1 a.m. I was on a stretch of road not too far from the same general area when I saw something running alongside the street. Same size, same weird-looking fur. The way it moved jogged my memory immediately. It wasn't quite like a coyote, and not like a stray dog either. It just didn't match anything familiar. A few minutes after I passed it, my phone rang. It was my coworker, who'd left work right after me and was driving the same route. She asked if I'd seen it too, that dog thing, she called it. I said, yeah, I did, and she got kind of excited. She said there'd been talk in the news about some newly discovered species of mammal spotted in the region, supposedly a hybrid of some kind. She couldn't remember the full details, but it was supposed to be something between a domestic dog and another wild animal. For a while after that, the story was apparently all over the local news. I remember catching some brief mention of it but never really followed up. Looking back, I wish I'd written down the name of whatever species they said it was, or at least saved an article about it. What still gets me is that I'd seen that same kind of animal years before any of that news broke. I don't know if it was the same thing people later started talking about or if I just happened to see something that looked similar, but it's always sat a little weird with me. It wasn't scary, just strange, like noticing something that doesn't quite fit and then realizing later maybe it wasn't supposed to be there at all. I had this one experience with a friend driving on a back road in Pennsylvania around 2 a.m. It was a road we drove on a lot, located near an old cemetery as well. Just as we were pulling past where the cemetery begins, we both saw this thing fly past the car overhead. It was totally unexplainable. I have never seen anything like it in my life. The only thing I can compare it to is a gargoyle or a humanoid bat. Its wingspan stretched about the width of the car. And its body was about 5 to 6 feet in height. It was hard to get a feel for just how big it was. It was flying fairly fast past us, and we were already going 40 miles per hour. But I did not want to say anything to my friend. I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. I turned the music down a little after I saw this. After about 10 seconds of silence, my friend goes, so are we going to talk about whatever the hell it is we just saw? At that point I knew it wasn't just me. I must say, after seeing whatever it was, we both had a very uneasy feeling and wanted to get home as quickly as possible. I'd be lying if I said I didn't run into my house that night immediately after getting out of my car. It took moving 1,000 miles away to finally feel comfortable enough to tell you this story. This happened just before my senior year of high school over a period of 3 weeks in the summer. I was 17 years old, drug-free, and sober. At the most, I took Advil for headaches every now and again. I just want to assure you I was not on any mind-altering substances or long-term medication that could affect my cognitive ability. During the summer my curfew was 11 p.m., and this occurred while driving home from my, at that time, boyfriend's house, which took roughly 15 minutes, so let's say about 10:45 at night. I was full of energy at this age and a night owl, so I was not even remotely tired. In fact, I was hyped up with the warm summer nighttime breeze, car windows down, singing along to the radio. I took a shortcut through back roads to avoid going into the tiny city with its jerk cops. Also, one of the roads I took was super straight and flat, so I could really speed, and that feels great when you're a teenager. But right before that road I had to take 2 very close turns to get onto it. First I'd take a right turn that was more than 90 degrees, almost back the way I had come, and then in exactly half a mile I would turn left onto the long straight road where I could really put the gas pedal down. Since it was only half a mile, I normally didn't speed up that much, because the small stretch of road was more like packed gravel, and it would be a waste, as I would have to slow down again to turn left onto the much better road where I could let loose. The tiny property on the inside corner of the left turn is where all this went down. A house had recently been built there, 2 stories with a detached garage, and it seemed odd how quickly it had been erected, as we built our family house and it took us a year to finish it. I will start at the beginning because I believe this is all related. Week 1, I am positively jamming to my music, the wind whipping through my car feels great, and I'm relaxed in my very familiar drive home. I slow down to make my right turn onto the rough rural road, just bebopping along, when my lights illuminate something stunning sitting on the corner of the road. It's a wolf, a real wolf, a solid white real wolf. I know the difference between my dog breeds and a wolf. I love watching dog competitions and wildlife documentaries and have even met a 1/4 wolf in person. They look different from domestic dogs. This was a wolf, and it was amazing and blowing my mind. I slow down even more while I turn down my music. I'm getting close to it, and I notice that it's not minding me at all. It is sitting perfectly still on the corner of the road, staring at the house. Almost unblinking, its ears didn't even flick towards me, all its attention was focused on this house. I was so close I could have reached out my window and brushed the fur on the back of its head. I was smiling and amazed, but my mind was already churning. It made no sense for a wolf to be behaving like that, even less for there to be a white wolf in rural North Alabama in the summer. I came to a complete stop behind it, marveling at its fur and presence. I felt euphoric, like I had seen something rare and blessed. My mind made a jump to the local Indian stories of animal spirit guardians, and I started to wonder. I couldn't stay though. Mom would never believe me if I told her I was late because of a spirit wolf. With a sigh I said goodbye to the wolf and drove home in a better mood than ever. I got to see something special, and it filled me with emotions of joy and peace. Week 2, I was driving home again, and I had been taking extra care to keep an eye out for my wolfy buddy, hoping to see him again around that area, so I drove extra slow with my window down and radio off. That was a horrible mistake. I should have realized what the presence of a guardian meant. It meant danger. Alas, I was on the short road approaching the new little house. Then I saw the thing that, to this very day, makes me question my sanity, my reality, and the possibility of eldritch terrors. As described. It was crouched right before their mailbox, its limbs folded and pulled in tight with its hunched posture, yet its head was still taller than the box. It was mottled green and black with undertones of blue, and it looked wet and slimy all over. Its head was elongated, allowing for an extended maw full of razor-sharp teeth. The upper half of its body looked emaciated, with barely more than frog-like thin skin pulled over angular long bones and ropey muscles to hold it upright. And at the end of its grossly stretched arms were equally terrible long fingers. While its legs had bulk to them and looked equipped for running, with back-facing knees for sprinting, and tipped in raptor-like curved claws. It looked tall, maybe 7 feet, maybe more, just folded up into this predator's posture, waiting for prey. Then there were its eyes, solid black and sunken. I still want to vomit thinking about its eyes looking at me. Then I realized it's going to look at me, it's going to see me, and there is no avoiding it. Panic and terror unique to this alien thing swallowed me instantly, feeling like I was tilting off the world I had always known and into an abyss where monsters like this exist. I couldn't breathe, but I had to get my window up. I had to get my window up, or I would be ripped by those teeth and torn with those claws. Blood would adorn the cabin of my car, and I would become an unsolved mystery. I had a manual crank window. Screw me, I had a crank window because I was scared of crashing into water and not being able to get out of my car, but now I realize that there are far worse things in the world than crashing into water. Its head was turning towards me, and I had let off the gas, but I was still getting closer to it. It made me want to scream, but I had to get my window up first, and I was cranking it as hard as I could. I was starting to cry as I finally got the window closed, and then I put my gas pedal to the floor. Gravel road be damned. I thought I must not look at it as I pass, I must not look at it or make direct eye contact. I just shouldn't, it's not good to connect with these things. I've already seen too much. My tires had found grip, and I started to launch forward, passing it. In my peripheral vision I could see it starting to unfold its limbs, and it sent a terrible chill down my spine. I'm screwed, I'm really screwed. I was mumbling through my tears as I slid around the turn, fishtailing for a moment before I rocketed down the road. I felt sick, my heart was hammering, I had snot and tears rolling down my face, and my hands were shaking. I glanced in my rearview mirror and could only see darkness, as there were no street lamps out there. I used a trick I've mentioned in one of my other stories to tap my brakes softly enough that the light comes on, but I don't actually slow down. Red lit up the dust that was billowing up in my wake, but amidst the swirling chaos I thought I saw a darker shadow than the rest, a tall, thin shadow. I had enough and decided I was going to drive straight to the lighted roads and not let off the gas again the rest of the way. No more looking back, I was going to drive 109 miles per hour, which is as fast as I can go before my governor kicks in. I even ran a stop sign at the end of the road, because I was not going to get caught by this thing if I could help it. I took a right onto the highway and flew home. I might have even been relieved to get pulled over, but I did not. When I got home no one was awake. I was pretty trusted to come home on time, so I called my boyfriend and cried to him for a long time before I was able to explain. He was dismissive and thought I was pulling a joke on him, then he thought I was just being crazy and seeing things. There are many reasons we didn't stay together, but his insensitivity contributed. Week 3, I refused to take my shortcut anymore. For that reason, I would have to leave my boyfriend's house a bit early, and he'd been making fun of me about it all week. One of the days we went to a park to walk around, and on the way back he decided he wanted to drive by the house where I saw that thing. I was hysterical, begging him not to drive there, but he would not be dissuaded, so as we got closer and I could not stop him, I leaned my passenger side seat all the way back and pulled myself down. Cowering in panic of getting near the place. I hid below the window and covered my eyes while panting heavily, reliving the traumatic night in my mind again. At one point he stopped the car. "Spooky, you have to see this," he said. "No," I whined, resisting him pulling at my arm. "No, you really have to see this, look," he said in a changed tone of astonishment. With tears in my eyes, I uncurled and slowly peeked over the rim of the window. The house was gone, burnt clear down to the foundation with only a handful of framing beams still standing. The ground around the house was blackened in a perfect large circle. My boyfriend started to get out of the car. I shouted, "No, let's get out of here," while I grabbed for his arm, but he easily avoided me and got out. He walked around the ashy piles of the ruins for a bit, using a stick to poke at this and that. When he finally came back, he had an intense look of thinking on his face. There was no evidence of any personal belongings, furniture, power wiring, or even interior walls. "It doesn't seem like other burned out houses, something's weird." When we got to his house, he searched for news articles about any house fires in the area. There weren't any. He called the closest fire station and was quickly brushed off by the person that answered, as they didn't know about a fire there. And didn't have time to find out before quickly hanging up on him. I never wanted to see that place again. I went out of my way to avoid the roads in that area. Talking about it still makes my chest tighten, my skin crawl, and my eyes water. My brain still has trouble because I know I saw it, a thing that is nothing like any creature known to humans, yet still I saw it. If you've heard of something that matches its description, let me know. Alright, that's gonna be it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed these creepy cryptid stories. And hey, if you've ever seen something strange out in the wild, feel free to share it in the comments. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.